Welcome. I'm Eric Fleming, host of A Moment with Eric Fleming, the podcast of our time. I want to personally thank you for listening to the podcast. If you like what you're hearing, then I need you to do a few things. First, I need subscribers. I'm on Patreon at patreon.com/A Moment with Eric Fleming. Your subscription allows an independent podcaster like me the freedom to speak truth to power and to expand and improve the show. Second, leave a 5-star review for the podcast on the streaming service you listen to it. That will help the podcast tremendously. Third, go to the website, momenteric.com. There you can subscribe to the podcast, leave reviews and comments, listen to past episodes, and even learn a little bit about your host. Lastly, don't keep this a secret like it's your own personal guilty pleasure. Tell someone else about the podcast. Encourage others to listen to the podcast and share the podcast on your social media platforms because it is time to make this moment a movement. Thanks in advance for supporting the podcast of our time. I hope you enjoy this episode as well. Hello, and welcome to The Moment with Eric Fleming. I am your host, Eric Fleming. And today is another great episode. I am really blessed to have quality guests come on this program. And I hope that they inspire, that they enlighten, that they make you feel good. Because we know we need to feel good right about now as we continue to push through 2024. As a matter of fact, it's time for a moment of news. Donald Trump must pay $354.9 million in penalties for overstating his net worth to lenders and is banned from serving as an officer or director of any New York corporation for 3 years. Trump will also stand trial on criminal charges related to hush money payments after a New York judge set a trial date for March 25th and rejected Trump's request to dismiss the case. Alexei Navalny, a prominent Russian opposition figure, died in a penal colony, drawing international attention and critical statements from U.S. leaders like Vice President Kamala Harris, who met with Navalny's wife at the Munich Security Conference. The Alabama Supreme Court ruled that embryos created by in vitro fertilization are extrauterine children, thereby having legal protection like any other child. Fani Willis, the prosecutor in Trump's Georgia election interference case, denied allegations of a conflict of interest due to a past romance with a colleague during a court hearing. U.S. Senator Joe Manchin announced that he will not run for president and is not seeking re-election this year. Special counsel Robert Hur, who investigated President Joe Biden's handling of classified documents, is set to testify before the House Judiciary Committee on March 12th. Texas is building a military base camp in Eagle Pass near the U.S.-Mexico border to deter illegal immigration as part of Governor Greg Abbott's border security efforts. Special counsel David Weiss has indicted Alexander Smirnov, a former FBI informant, for lying about Hunter Biden's business dealings with Burisma Holdings. An independent commission in New York has approved a new congressional map, which experts say provides a slight advantage to Democrats. Charles McGonigal, a former FBI official, was sentenced to 28 months in prison for concealing payments from a former Albanian intelligence officer. Taylor Swift donated $100,000 to the family of Elizabeth Lopez Galvan, who was killed near a Kansas City Chiefs rally. 2 men who were wounded themselves have been charged with murder. And Yale University issued an apology for its historical connections to slavery following a research project into its past associations. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a moment of news. All right, and I know I'm not the best news presenter. That's why I wanted Grace to do it. But as we stated, Grace is recovering, and I ask you to continue to send your thoughts and prayers to her as she's recovering. And trust me, I will be glad when she comes back. But we're gonna, as we said before the segment started, we're gonna push through and do what we got to do. And speaking about pushing through, it's time for my first guest. And her name is Christina Carrega. Christina Carrega is an award-winning journalist who is currently the National Criminal Justice Reporter for Capital B and an adjunct professor with the American Journalism Online Graduate Program at New York University. Previously, Christina was a crime and justice reporter for CNN, multimedia reporter for ABC News, news editor of the Queens Daily Eagle and Brooklyn Daily Eagle newspapers, as well as a courts reporter for the New York Daily News and New York Post. During Christina's career, she has covered wrongful conviction cases, thoroughly reported on high-profile trials, and investigated alleged scams in the travel and child care industries. Christina's professional journalism career began as a freelancer with the Canarsie Courier and newspaper director for the Greater Ridgewood Youth Council, a nonprofit after-school program in Queens, New York. The New York Association of Black Journalists awarded her first place for 2017's and 2014's Best Spot News, and in 2013 was a finalist for the National Association of Black Journalists, NABJ, Best Single News Story. She has previously served as NYABJ's Vice President of Broadcast. She is also on the board for the Criminal Justice Journalist Organization and is a mentor with Report for America. Christina is a first-generation born American and was raised in Brooklyn, New York. She graduated from St. John's University, where she majored in journalism and minored in international studies. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor and privilege to have as a guest on this podcast, Christina Carrega. All right, Christina Carrega. How you doing, sister? You doing good?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to discuss all these things with you.
Well, I'm honored, first of all, that you had the time to do it because you're one of the busiest reporters out there, and you are very intensive in your work, very detailed oriented, and so I wish that people at the New York Times and others were as detailed as you, but that's a whole nother conversation for another day.
Yeah.
So what I like to do with my guests at the beginning is to offer a quote to them. It's either something that they may have said, something that they may have written, or something that relates to the work that they're doing. So I picked this one out, and it says, "Reform makes us safer when we actually do the work that the community needs, and when we turn away from policies that damage the community." When you hear that quote, what do you think?
I'm stuck on the part about when we turn away from policies that that affect the community. And it's true because, you can take laws that's been written decades ago and apply it for every case, or you can look at the individual that's involved in said case and look at the statute and say, does this even apply in today's standards, and go from there to apply the law to that person. So yeah, that statement is very much how I would love most prosecutor offices across the country, all 2,300 plus, to behave, but that's just not the case. And that's where I come in to tell these stories.
So now I mentioned that obviously you're not with the New York Times. You're with Capital B, and you've been with them pretty much since the beginning. So kind of talk about the history of Capital B and what is its mission.
Yes. So actually, I made my 2 year mark, as did Capital B, on January 30th of this year. They launched with Lauren and Akoto, had this big dream of actually having a newsroom owned and operated by Black folks. The journalists are Black folks. We're amplifying the voices of Black folks. We are giving platforms for scholars and experts and grassroots organizations that give the needs for Black folks, ways to help them. We're giving them those platforms, and we're going to the rural areas. We're talking to folks who are involved in environmental issues, politics, criminal justice, obviously, politics and health, and we're just attacking it on a national level. It's a small team of us, 5 of us so far, and we're hoping to grow. And we have newsrooms in Atlanta and Indiana, that we just launched. So we're spreading that awareness on a local level as well, where there's news deserts, as we consider them. Gary is, I think, our most dire newsroom that we have just launched, considering it's close to Chicago, but they don't even have a local news station to tell them what's going on around the corner. And that's the problem. And that's where Capital B comes in.
Yeah, and that's absolutely amazing considering that's the hometown of the Jacksons. One of the first prominent black mayors in America, Richard Hatcher, was there. They actually, I think, had a national black political convention in Gary, Indiana, during the 70s. And like you said, due to its proximity to Chicago, a lot of times they get Chicago news. But I had a relative that was in politics in East Chicago, and he was telling me, a lot of folks don't even know we exist because, they just think, and especially with our name, they just think we're a suburb of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my close friends is from Hammond. So all those cities are right there together. And that's really, really needed to have a reliable, timely news source. And there's a sister in Harvey, Illinois, kind of doing the same thing y'all are doing. And so it's refreshing to see these nonprofit, strictly about the news organizations developing. Mississippi has a couple. I know Mississippi Today. I don't know if the Jackson or Mississippi Free Press is nonprofit now, but I know Mississippi Today was. So, in light of that, and me highlighting that, why do black journalists matter? I saw that on a T-shirt you were wearing, so that's why I said I might ask that question.
Now, if there was going to be a quote thrown at me, it would have been that one, right? Because I do wear a Black Journalists Matter T-shirt that was actually given out. Actually, it was a part of the fundraising efforts within the National Association of Black Journalists convention in Vegas 2 years ago. They sold that shirt, and I purchased it because it matters. We matter to be in those newsrooms. And going to NABJ almost every year since I joined, since 2009, I think, and been a part of the local and national chapters in New York and now in the DC, Baltimore area. Just being a part of that organization and just having that type of home to just talk to other Black journalists about what's going on in their newsrooms. It's humbling for me in my career because I started off in a large newspaper and the New York Post. And then I went to the New York Daily News, and in between did a stop at the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office. But while I'm at these large entities that have over hundreds of thousands of circulating newspapers at the time, I go to NABJ and I'm around a bunch of Black and brown people, and we're talking about news, and we're very intelligent individuals who have the talent. And I go back to my newsrooms and I'm the only Black woman. And that line of has happened in every newsroom I've worked in until I got to ABC News. So we're talking over 10 years in the industry at that time before I saw another Black woman in the newsroom with me, or even another Black woman on the same team, or Black man on the same team with me. It took that long before I saw that. And even seeing that one other in the room, look around, it's still just us. And I just never understood why it was that. I feel it might be a HR issue. It might be some type of, blocking still happening because of how long we have been a part of this industry, or at least allowed into these newsrooms, that we're not seen as having a perspective. And I think we've seen milestones over the years, whether it's the uprising in 2020 or even after Eric Garner, to show how Black voices in these newsrooms matter, because we show that perspective. We correct errors before they become public, mostly. I know I've done it several times at different news organizations. So, yeah, Black journalists matter.
Yeah, and I see that you're real active with NABJ. Um, I had a brief stint uh, with NABJ in Jackson when I worked for the Mississippi Link. I was like, I think they made me the vice president of print or something. I don't know, newspapers, wherever it was. But it wasn't a long stint, and it was kind of some different dynamics going on. So I don't really brag about that, but I was a part of the community because I worked for both Black newspapers in Jackson. So I always want, when I can get African American journalists on the podcast, I always want to stress that point about the importance of the Black press and all that stuff. But I want to ask you, because you seem to have developed a particular niche. So why did you decide to be a criminal justice reporter? How did you go about saying, okay, I'm gonna cover this stuff?
I'm giggling for those who can't see, because it was not my choice. And a lot of journalists, I think, say the same thing. They kind of get just thrown into a topic and they realize, you know what? I actually like how this is going. So, as I said, I worked at the New York Post straight out of undergrad from St. John's University in Queens, where I did study journalism. And I started off as a copy kid, handing out paperwork within the newsroom, but it got me the opportunity to be seen with the editors inside those newsrooms and seeing how a newspaper gets developed. And we're talking about a time that was before digital. So literally printing out pages, handing them out, like really. And while I was there, I became a general news assignment reporter, aka a permalancer, a permanent freelancer. No benefits, getting paid terrible wages. But nonetheless, I did that for 3.5 years, doing a bunch of different stories under the sun. And then one day I threatened to leave, and they were like, "Oh no, we have a job for you." It was covering the courts in Queens, and that's how I got thrusted into this beat. But why I stayed in it so long is the more important reasoning why I'm still considered a national criminal justice reporter. It's because I got into journalism because I knew growing up in Brooklyn that stuff was happening in Canarsie, where I specifically really got raised, and I wouldn't see it on the news. I'd pick up the paper and I didn't know why the cops were at the corner that day. I never knew what was happening in my community. And I knew it was because there weren't journalists telling these stories. And I knew I had to be that person, the voice for the voiceless, the voice for communities where there aren't people going to the gunshots in the neighborhoods they consider high crime, quote unquote. And I wasn't afraid to do that. So I became a part of those newsrooms where I would go to the Bronx, and I would go to East New York, and I would go to Bed-Stuy and Brownsville to cover a case, because it was important to tell those stories. And then after covering that general news assignment aspect and being thrown into the courts, I saw the connection of how I could complete those cases I covered in the street in the courtroom, and take the case to show the readers how that arrest that happened years ago ended. And then as I was more involved in the justice system, I started realizing how many people really don't understand what's going on behind those walls. The taxpayer funded things, prosecutors, judges, defense attorneys, and people around the corner don't know that your taxpayer dollars are going towards these people's salaries, and you should really care who are the people behind those walls and what they're doing. And I found myself sometimes becoming a defense attorney, doing investigations and helping attorneys out with cases. And it was just so interesting to be involved in something where you can tangibly see the what, albeit taking years to happen, somebody's name being cleared or seeing an acquittal or seeing justice done correctly. And even covering wrongful convictions has really bolstered my want to stay in this field because it's showing how the system can be used in the negative and the positive, but also exposing and explaining those elements to the reader is where I feel I'm needed in this industry.
And this is true. You are needed, not just in this industry, but in society as a whole. Truth telling is a commodity. It is time. And so I greatly appreciate the work that you're doing. And so I want to highlight some stories that you have covered and kind of get the podcast listeners up to date on where particular cases are. And I just because of time constraints, I've just highlighted a few. But one in particular, I want you to, we're going to start off with dealing with the case of Brittany Watts. Now, that's the young lady that was being charged with manslaughter, I guess, or whatever, because she had a miscarriage in Ohio. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Abuse of corpse was the charge.
Okay. All right. Kind of go into detail about that case and how it ended up.
Yeah, so Brittany was 22 weeks pregnant when she was experiencing discomfort, went to her doctor, and was told that this pregnancy is not going to last. You're going to end up having a miscarriage. There were conversations in between all that where she was being sent home, she was waiting too long, and unbeknownst to her, her questions of what she should do and how she should go about, seeing through the miscarriage, she decided to go home. And that's when the situation happened, which happens to a lot of women on a daily basis. She went to the bathroom and the miscarriage happened and she flushed. And her just telling that honestly, like other women would have to a nurse practitioner, we later learned had taken that information and called the police because she herself didn't know, or she herself assumed that because of the Ohio laws that Brittany committed a crime by not properly discarding the remains of the child that she was carrying. And she was prosecuted. Thankfully, she wasn't held on bail where she was sitting behind bars for X amount of months. As we know, this case has gone on, and most people who can't afford bail, if they're given a certain dollar amount, they end up sitting there until a resolution happens or bail is reduced and they're able to pay it. And so Brittany was able to be out, and as her attorney fought the case, and it came back a few months later that they declined, a grand jury declined to indict her, which was great news for everyone because if the grand jury had decided to indict Brittany for abusing a corpse, not only would that have thrown her into the criminal justice system unnecessarily, it would have also, set a precedent for other women around the country, black, white, or other, to actually be concerned that their natural body behavior can end up being a criminal charge and sprayed across the internet. And you're busy, you can't even heal from the loss of the child that you probably were dreaming about. I'm not sure what Brittany's situation was with this particular pregnancy, but any woman and any in this day and age where all the complications of black women having to get pregnant or even just having a safe pregnancy to term, having that blasted out there in the public eye, it's a horrible thing, but Brittany went through it. And from what I understand, her attorney has said that she has been very grateful for the outpouring of support that she received from other advocates and other women who've been in her shoes. And yeah, she's going to possibly become an advocate herself, which most people who have experienced the system do become advocates.
Yeah, and this is an example of why it's important to have us because if you weren't the first, you were one of a small few people who were covering this. And then somehow, some way, either through her attorney or whatever, somebody got wind of it or read your article or whatever. And then it started becoming a national story. But this was like months after she had been arrested. So again, this is the reason why it's important to have the black press, because this story should have been right up there with the young lady in Texas
Mm-hmm.
who had to leave her state to have a medically approved abortion, right? But you know, and this is the reason why people in Ohio, the citizens of Ohio, wanted to make sure that abortion was a constitutional right in that state. The next case is Niani Finlayson. Finlayson.
Mm-hmm.
Now, like I said, I'm just going to try to throw the what I've picked up from it and then let you deal into it. But this was a young lady who was killed by a Los Angeles County deputy sheriff,
Mm-hmm.
and she was her child. I think her child is like what 9 years old,
Yep.
and the officer killed her in front of her child.
Yep.
Tell the story.
So last year, Nilani Finlayson calls 911. She's on the phone with 911, and her daughter is with her. The man that she's dating at the time is in her home, and she wants this man out of her house. Most people who have someone they don't want around them, their first line of defense, if they don't know how to get rid of the person, they call 911. It's what we're taught from the time we're children. And so, Nailani did what she knew to do. In the interim, she had a kitchen knife on her for protection. And the accusation was the man pushed her daughter, who was 9 years old, and she wanted this man out. When the police arrived, it were two officers, a woman and a man, both white. And the body camera video shows the woman kicking at the door, which could be seen as a violation of some type of police procedure. Nailani then opens the door. But in that time, nobody's announcing themselves, police, like anything, right? Like, so it doesn't even give Nailani an opportunity to put the knife down, to then, address the people who are kicking at her door. But when the body camera shows you, it's two different body camera visions, angles they're showing you. But the one from the shooting officer's side, you see Nailani with the knife in her hand and still on the phone with 911 and her daughter nearby. And she says, I'm about to stab this man. But she's talking in general. She's talking in jest. She's in the middle of a heated situation. Of course, she's going to be bellowing out just anything. But of course, they're not seeing it this way because this could be a moment of lack of cultural understanding, right? So the officers are going inside of the apartment as the body camera is showing, and Nailani is seen in the area where the man she wants out of her house, who's sitting on the couch, she's in the area where he is. The officer whose body camera we're watching, who is also the shooting officer, there's no words exchanged. Shots go off, 4 shots to Nailani. She gets shot. She's dead. The daughter was in the kitchen at the time, but still could see and hear her mother dead in the living room. And the gentleman that she wanted out of the house is screaming, "Why did you shoot her?" And so her family, attorney, and everybody who has been very much involved in this, a lot of investigations are happening. Black Lives Matter grassroots is on top of this as well to lend support to the family. And this officer who shot Nailani, we found out through investigating arms that he had committed the same type of act a couple of years ago to somebody else, where he also just walked up in the house and just opened fire, no words exchanged. And in that situation, there was no body camera to show what happened. And in turn, he was cleared of charges and back on the streets to then, less than a year later, or maybe a little bit over a year, kills Nailani. And so justice is still being called for her from her family and other activists in the area. And it's just another unfortunate person's name to be added to the list of rallying cries at the next Black Lives Matter rally that unfortunately may happen because of the history of how many police shootings we have in this country.
Now, is this deputy still on the force?
As you know, the rules and policies of most police departments, the officers removed from duty pending investigation. So he's still getting paid his salary, which we found on the internet was close to over $200,000 he's been making, and he hasn't really been on the job that long.
Okay. But he hasn't been
Well,
on the. Go ahead.
I wasn't sure if this was his case, but I believe he is also training other officers on how to. Yes, it is. He's also a field training officer. When he got back on the force after the first case he was cleared from, they promoted him to becoming a training officer. So this person who just walks up into houses during 911 calls and shoots people, questions asked later, has been training other officers in this department as well. So that's a
Yeah.
concern.
So I don't know if you did any background on me, but I have a law enforcement background.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime I hear that, it's like this guy screwed up, and now he comes back and gets a promotion. And it's somebody that we literally had to rearrange a state government department when I was in the legislature because this racist guy was given a promotion, and we were like, no, we want him fired. Why is he getting? So we literally had to separate one agency from another just so that agency he was under could fire him. I mean, it's just I don't understand that logic, but that's. But I wanted her name and I wanted that case to get highlighted. Now, this one, a friend of mine, Carlos Moore, is the attorney. And the young man's name is Quintavious Eason.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he's a child, right? He's like 10, 11 years old, something like that. And this is in,
Possibly 11 by now. Yeah.
yeah, and this is in Mississippi. Now, he was arrested for peeing somewhere. Go into that one because I think some people may have heard of the case, but it hasn't really been getting a lot of national play. But you've been covering it for Capital B, so kind of talk about what's going on with him.
Yeah. So Quantavious was 10 years old over the summer. It was August. His mom was running an errand at a lawyer's office for separate issues. And, he was in the car with his sister and he needed to go to the bathroom. Okay. So the sister warns her brother that there's no bathroom in the law office. There's a sign and everything, no bathroom for the public. So I guess Quantavious being 10 and needing to pee, he did what little boys when their parents are around, though whenever they're on a road trip or wherever, he got out the car, discreetly put the car door behind him, and he went to the bathroom. As he was peeing, an officer passed by and seen what was going on, stopped and told him that wasn't what he was supposed to be doing. It was wrong, but then proceeded to go find his mom, the officer alerts the mom what happened. The mom also tells Quantavious that he should have came inside so that they could have handled it later on. And, his mom, Latanya, thought that was the end of it. Oh no, here comes four more officers coming on through, and I'm sure Latanya must have been as confused as I was reading the reports that these grown five men, all white, could not come up with the decision to let the little boy go and go home. No, they decided they must arrest this child for public urination. And they put him in the back of the police car, the marked police car. So it had all the materials of somebody who was an adult arrested, handcuffed, the gate, the hard seat, the whole gamut in the back of a police car. If you've ever been in one, it's not a comfortable scene. And for a 10-year-old to be back there, not handcuffed, all right? So I guess the police felt that, oh, well, we didn't handcuff him with something to highlight. They never thought about the separation anxiety that could come from this child. They didn't think about the mom have her child taken from her. She has no recourse in that moment. But what she did do in that moment was take a photograph. And that photograph is what made this story become at least an international conversation of what laws do we really and what should we really enforce, especially when it comes to juveniles. And we have this child here who unnecessarily is going to be put into the criminal justice system for what? And when they get to trial, at first mom was thinking, let me just go through the system like most parents do, and their child gets busted for something as trivial as this. She was just going to sign the papers away, probably not even read it, and keep it moving. But for some reason, Latanya said, let me read these documents. And after talking through it with Carlos Moore, her attorney, they realized that having her child be subjected to adult-like ramifications for something like peeing, it's just no. Mom had to stand up for her child and say, no, I'm not signing this. even though ramifications of it for him would have been worse, they were threatening to amplify the charges, and that would have caused it to become a bigger case. And so they took the gamble. And so Carlos Moore filed the appeal to throw the case out. And a few months after that, about earlier this month, February 5th, they dismissed the case. So thankfully, Latanya did what I hope more parents are able to do if they have legal representation, to stand up for their children if they're behind the system, especially in juvenile court, so that they could prevent this kind of stuff from ever happening.
Now, what city in Mississippi was this?
This was in a tiny town. I might mispronounce the name of it. What part of Mississippi was it called? Um, Apologies for the delay. What is the name of the uh Santobia?
Senatobia.
Senatobia.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
All right. I was
yeah,
talking the A. Senatobia. Yes.
yeah. So they don't get a whole lot of action in Senatobia. I'm just the officers. They don't do a whole lot of work, and
You
so
don't say.
yeah. So I guess that was kind of their thing. Um, but that's just insane that they would go to that length. Because if that was me and had done it, it'd have been like it's a misdemeanor charge. So for them to even go through the motions of that for a child, that's usually when that officer's like, "Hey, you ain't supposed to be doing that. Where your mom at?" We go ahead and talk to the mom and say, "Look, your child was out here peeing, right? Let's not do that, okay? And keep it pushing. It is like, that was your officer friendly moment and keep it moving. But for them to do that's kind of the underscore about the value of black bodies, right?
Mhm.
And how our children, the theme is how our children are adultified as compared to other children. And
Mhm.
it's like this 10-year-old peeing was such a threat. First of all, that you called backup. What was that all about? And then to turn around and to go through the machinations of actually having a court case, to actually put the taxpayers through that. But
Well,
go ahead.
we can rest assured that the officer who could not independently think and had to call for backup has been fired. So we don't have to worry about him being an officer in that jurisdiction. What we may have to be concerned about is him going to another jurisdiction and doing the same thing.
Right. And we kind of joke about it in a sense, but the reality is that these are the type of officers, right, that develop this implicit bias because of something. I got fired because I arrested this kid for public urination and yada, yada, yada. And instead of taking that as a teachable moment about not trying to Barney Fife your job, you internalize it. And then the next black person you encounter in law enforcement, you don't treat them with the same objectivity that you should as a law enforcement officer. So that's the danger of that too. And so, but I wanted to highlight that. And of course, like I thought, we're being pressed for time, but I definitely wanted to highlight that. And I want you to talk about the situation with Darian Harris. Now, this is the brother that was in Chicago. I think he got arrested for something. Those charges were dropped and then turned around and he got rearrested again and actually had to serve some time. Kind of talk about that story.
Yeah, so Darian Harris had been released from after being wrongfully convicted for 12 years for a crime he did not commit, that was relying on a sole witness that happened to have the vision of like the blindest of the blind. Like could not see anything and had documents to show it in federal court because he was one of those people who were suing several businesses and including a university for discriminating against him for his legally blind vision. But this information was not known to the defense. and it's kind of shaky to know if the prosecutor knew about it because it seemed like they knew, but they didn't. So it's very conflicting. Nonetheless, the charges were overturned, and I mean, the charges were dismissed, and pending a decision from the Cook County State Attorney's Office whether they were going to retry him or not.
And that's
But
that
one of the
lady. I'm sorry, I did interrupt you, but that's under Miss Fox, right? Is that her name?
Yes, Kim Fox. Kim Fox, who has made national attention for some right and wrong reasons, whether it came from the Jussie Smollett case, whether it's the R. Kelly case. But notably, she was the first Black woman to serve in that office. And she also had shook up the office by having their conviction review integrity unit launched, which has been revamped to a conviction review unit, which has overturned several wrongful convictions in that office, which is the second largest office in the country. So, Kim Fox has been, she has her name out there for those reasons, but it was the one in this case. And surprising to me that she would even sit back and decide whether they should retry Darian's case was strange to me. This seemed to be like an open and shut, wrongful conviction, let the man go home. No, that was not what happened. So this was another situation where Black Lives Matter grassroots had been in contact with the family for support, and we were able to contact the family through them and talk to the mom and talk about the 12 years that it had been for the family, what they've been through. Because, like I said earlier, when it comes to wrongful conviction cases, it really keeps me in this beat because it shows how the system can be used for and against people. And righting those wrongs are very important to tell, to show how jacked up the system really is. And so we interviewed the mom and Darian, as we were actually doing the reporting, it came out that they were going to release him from prison and he didn't have to go through a second trial. So the story had to be reformatted, obviously, but it was good news. And Darian is home. I believe he got married and all this other stuff is just happening for him right now, which is the positive things that we like to see when there's an exoneration, and I'm sure he'll get resource, and I'm sure he'll file a lawsuit, and those are other actionable recourse methods that people who have been wrongfully convicted can take to get some type of compensation for the years they were torn away from their families.
Yeah. So, you know, again, that's just part of why it's so important for you and others, and really just the Black press as a whole, to exist, to keep shining a light and keep putting pressure, because Miss Fox, a unique situation, and then we got to wrap this up. But Miss Fox got elected because the Black Lives Matter movement in Chicago was against the previous state's attorney. She was the state's attorney that was involved in the cover up of the young man who got killed with the knife. I can't think of his, he got shot 16 times. And yeah. So,
He'll come to me.
yeah. And so, I mean, and you have to forgive us, ladies and gentlemen, because the unfortunate thing is there's just so many of these tragedies. And it's like, and you're trying to remember, huh?
Did I get it? It's Laquan McDonald.
McDonald, that's the name. And so, yeah, that brother, and so they held that tape for like a year, I think, right? And so the Black Lives Matter folks campaigned against that woman, and I think she was like the first Latino to have the position. And then Miss Fox wanted them to endorse her, and they said, no, we're not endorsing you. We're just trying to get rid of her. And so now if you benefit from that, so be it. And this particular case with Darian Harris legitimizes why they didn't endorse her, because now it gives them the latitude to deal with her office and make sure that justice is done for him, just or anybody else. So, but like you said, at least she has fulfilled some obligation in trying to fix some wrongful convictions, but nonetheless, the system is jacked, and I really appreciate the fact, Christina, that you're out here highlighting the good and the bad of it. So, for people to be able to get in touch with you and to follow what's going on, not just in the criminal justice sector, but other aspects of the Black community on Capital B. Kind of tell folks how they either get in touch with you or follow Capital B.
So you can follow Capital B on all platforms at Capital B News. We are Capital B in the formal sense of it, but for social media purposes, we have the news at the end. And you can follow me on most platforms at Chris Carrega, so that's ChrisCarrega, on X and Twitter, and X is Twitter, duh. X Threads. They change their names every other day.
Right.
I can't keep up, but nonetheless, I'm out there. LinkedIn, we could connect that way too. And look out for all of our election coverage that's going to be coming through. Of course, in criminal justice world, we have elections that we'll be keeping an eye on, such as the Franklin County, Ohio district attorney race. They may vote their first Black DA there. And I'm going to be publishing a story next week about that. So I look forward to everybody reading that.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Christina Carrega. Please follow her on Capital B, and please follow Capital B because, like I said, truth telling is the commodity in this day and age. All right, guys, and we're going to catch y'all on the other side. All right, and we are back. And so now it's time for my next guest. And that is Miss Sharon Kyle. Sharon Kyle is the former president of the Guild Law School in Los Angeles, a law school that trains public interest attorneys. Sharon is an admitted social justice media activist. She is currently the publisher and co-founder of the LA Progressive, a daily digital political magazine that she and her partner/husband Dick Price have distributed for more than 15 years. Before immersing herself in the law and social justice, Ms. Kyle was a member of several space flight teams at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, where she managed resources for projects like Magellan, Genesis, and Mars Pathfinder. Sharon also sits on several boards, including the board of directors of the ACLU and the editorial board of blackcommentator.com. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor and privilege to have as a guest on this podcast, Sharon Kyle. All right, Sharon Kyle, how you doing, ma'am? You doing good?
I'm doing great. Thank you for inviting me. It's such a pleasure to be here with you.
Well, I'm honored to have you on, and I'm honored that we are part of the network in LinkedIn, and we kind of have some of the same friends, which is always good. But I really, some people, you're trying to pull for a particular issue or whatever the case may be, but there's some people you just want to have a conversation with. And you're one of those folks because you've been doing this for a long time, and you and your husband. And so, I'm really honored to be able to spend some time with you and just have a conversation. But the first thing I like to do is start off with a quote, right? So I pull a quote that's related to either the work that person is doing, something they might have said, something that they might have written. So your quote is really, really short. It says, "The power of the people will bring life to the world we deserve to live in." What does that quote mean to you?
Now, I don't think that's a quote that's something I've stated, although I'd love to steal it. But it did not originate with me. But what it means to me is that collectively, we the people we already have the power to create the world that we want, to create the kinds of governments that we want, to create the outcomes that we want. If only we understood we had that power, and if only we understood that that power comes to us as a collective. So the division that exists disempowers us.
So, and part of, I guess, what you do is based off of, from our research, off of your faith. So what exactly is a progressive Christian voice?
Great. Thank you so much. Lately, particularly since Trump, the latter part of Trump's administration, I've been making it very clear that I am a Christian. For a long time, white evangelical Christians have co-opted Christianity. That's been my experience. And I actually feel a sense of resentment when people blame evangelical Christians for Trump being in office. I think it's important that they make the distinction that we're talking about white evangelical Christians who provide complete loyalty. I think that they are the single demographic that has pledged fealty to Donald Trump. For me, what it means to be a Christian is to live a Christ-like life. And I do believe that if Jesus Christ was walking with us today, he would be out there marching against Donald Trump. So if anyone was to read the Bible and to read the red letters, read what did Jesus say, what did he do, and I think that you would characterize him as a progressive, someone who wanted equality, freedom for everyone. And I don't think that Trump or white evangelical Christians are living in ways that anyone would characterize as Christ-like.
Why did you and your husband start the LA Progressive newsletter? What was the motivation to do that?
Yeah. Okay, so my husband and I, both of us were married to other people at one time, so we're not each other's first marriage, but we are our last marriage. And at the time that we got together, I already had children. He already had a child. I have grown children. And we wanted to embark on a project that sort of could be our child. And we were trying to think of something to do, and we had similar or really pretty much identical political leanings. So we volunteered for a local Democratic club and volunteered to be their communications people. And we created their newsletter for the local Democratic club. Well, in 2008, when Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton were running in the Democratic primary, I think that was a primary like no other, except for the primary that's going on right now. Everybody was interested. People who didn't vote before, well, in the Black community, people that I knew that never voted, they were voting. And I found that we wanted to carry articles about Barack Obama. And in our particular Democratic club, many of the people were supporting Hillary. And they did not want us to publish articles about Barack Obama. So I said to my husband, let's just start our own thing. And that's how we started it. We started it because there was conflict within the Democratic. This is an extension, actually, of the Democratic Party. Initially, Barack Obama was not supported. They had planned to place Hillary in from the start, but Barack was too successful, and he won them over.
Well, and I can attest to that because I was a Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate in Mississippi during that time, and the reason why they wanted me to run in Mississippi was because we had a unique situation. We had two elections. Trent Lott had resigned, so that opened up a special election, and then they wanted former Governor Ronnie Musgrove, who I used to work for, to run in that race. And they were trying to discourage me from, even though I had run against Lott 2 years earlier, they were trying to discourage me from doing a petition campaign to run in the special. And Thad Cochran's seat was up. So they came down to Mississippi and, talked to me and, you know, and when they realized that I was serious about running, they said, well, look, why don't you run for the U.S. Senate against Cochran? Because in their mindset, like you said, they thought Hillary was going to be the nominee and they figured they needed somebody to get out the black vote. Well, lo and behold, Barack Obama got the nomination, and now people in Mississippi think I actually have a chance to win because Barack Obama was doing so well. So I definitely relate to the conflict that you were, because I had to deal with it as a candidate. There was a lot of tension within the Democratic Party. Donna Brazile, had to cut through some tape for me, and eventually the National AFL-CIO had to step in. So it was a lot of tension. So I definitely understood why you felt that you and your husband had to kind of break away from that, which kind of leads me to my next question. Many people have the impression that California is a progressive state in the national political discussion. Is that an accurate impression?
Absolutely not. Los Angeles and San Francisco, and maybe 15, 20 miles outside of those urban areas is where you find most people who might be left-leaning or consider themselves progressives. But I'd say that even that is not an accurate description of what I would call a progressive. I think that they're liberals, and liberals just kind of want policies to be nicer and kinder. They don't necessarily want for there to be a real revolution, which is what I want. And I'm not talking about a violent revolution, but I don't believe that we can get the kind of government that we want unless we have a dramatic change. And we can't have that by being liberals. So no, I don't agree. And then once you leave Los Angeles and San Francisco and you get into Bakersfield or, get further inland away from the coasts, well, let's face it, California has elected in the past 20 years 2 or 3 Republican governors. So no, California is not a progressive state.
Yeah, and the history of California to me has always been, it's been a swing state. In my lifetime, that's always been the case. I remember Gray Davis and, of course, Schwarzenegger. Reagan. Yeah, Reagan was, I was like 1 year old when Reagan was governor. But I'm just saying, I guess that's in my lifetime. But, there's been Republican governors, and Kevin McCarthy is from California. You know what I'm saying? Dan Issa, all these people. So it's like, I've always viewed California as a swing state. We've just, as Democrats, we've just been lucky to get those electoral votes every election, but it's not easy. And considering how many people and all that, is a very expensive state to campaign in. So no, I never thought that, but that's kind of the national narrative that California.
That is, right.
Yeah. Right.
That's the narrative. But if you're really steeped in politics, particularly progressive politics, then you understand what the narrative is. It's sort of what people who are just riding on the surface of politics come to believe. But if they do any research, they'll know that, in fact, we don't really have a coalition of progressives that are united in any state.
Right. Of all of the issues that have come across the political spectrum in this last election cycle, which issue do you think is the most important? Which one do you want progressives or just a general electorate to focus in on?
Wow, that's hard. Yeah, because, I published the LA Progressive, laprogressive.com for your audience. And I was actually just looking through all of our categories and all of our tags. And we have over 40,000 articles covering a good 1,000 categories. It's very difficult. We publish every day. It's a digital magazine. It's hard for me to pick one issue. I am a woman. I'm a Black woman. So there are some things that are concerned to me that maybe might not be a concern for other people. Things like in Los Angeles, and I live in Los Angeles. Los Angeles County has the largest unhoused population in the nation. And sadly, about 75% of that unhoused population is Black or brown. And when I say largest, I'm saying on any given night, you will find 70,000 people living in tents alongside the freeways, underneath bridges and overpasses. So I'd say that's one of my number one concerns. And my concerns really are about the economy, because underneath that, the undergirding issue that is at the root cause that causes the problems that we're having with not having affordable housing. Mass incarceration is another big issue, and it is impacting our universities. About 10 years ago, when you looked at the budget for California for its UC system, which is University of California, for its Cal State system, the budget for those systems exceeded the budget for California state incarceration systems. That carceral system passed the university and Cal State system about 10 years ago. So it surpassed that. We spend more money keeping people locked up in cages than we do in educating young Californians, particularly, again, disproportionately, again, Black and brown people.
And you touched on the homeless situation. I was reading somewhere there's some kind of effort dealing with Skid Row that's been going on for a while, that they want to like clean that up or get rid of people being on Skid Row. Yeah, go ahead. Enlighten us about it.
Right. So in Los Angeles, when I moved to Los Angeles, I'm originally from New York City. When I moved to Los Angeles, the downtown area of Los Angeles was sort of a neglected area. And over the past 15, 20 years, it started out maybe 25 years ago. There was a county redevelopment agency that was pouring money into developing the downtown area. We didn't really have people that lived in high rises like we do in Los Angeles. But slowly but surely, the downtown area, all of those old historic buildings where they were lofts, they were commercial spaces that were converted into residential spaces with commercial spaces down below. That has sort of taken over the downtown, and there's been an emergence of a really beautiful downtown. Sadly, that's resulted in them doing sweeps of people who were unhoused, in some cases due to no fault of their own, because we have a brutal economy here in Los Angeles. I don't know what I am not a renter. I live in my own home, but I think that the average rental rate for a 2-bedroom might be something close to $3,000 a month.
My goodness.
And I'm not talking luxury. I'm talking average. $3,000 a month. I think it's very hard to find anything less than $2,000 a month in the city of Los Angeles. So people are just one paycheck away from losing their housing. And I got off track, so I don't know if I answered your question.
Well, I was just saying, I know the city council, there was an issue about, how the street was going to be, redone, and like they were talking about, signs that were, it got into minutia about signs depicting this area as Skid Row and all that stuff.
I see.
Yeah. So
there's been a long drawn out battle. I will say that the ACLU, and I'm on the board of the ACLU of Southern California. The ACLU recently had a huge victory fighting in Orange County, where in Orange County the sheriffs would just come up to unhoused people's encampments and just knock down their tents, take all their belongings, trash them, just throw their personal belongings away, which the ACLU was successful in getting, I guess, initially gaining an injunction. And then they won the case where they found it was a violation of the Fourth Amendment right of unreasonable searches and unreasonable seizures. We're hoping that the success in that other county will spread throughout the rest of the counties in California, which I think we have 58 counties in California. But mostly around Los Angeles and San Francisco and San Diego is where you're going to find the bulk of the unhoused people, with the vast majority of them living in LA County.
All right. So now this is where I want to kind of pick your brain a little bit about certain people. As you kind of stated prior to the interview, some of the people I'm going to ask, and there's some that you haven't met, but you know of them. Well, I think you've met most of them, but there's some that you know more than others. So kind of talk to us about your support of Julian Assange. Now, I'm going to say what I know about him, and you correct me and go into detail. I just know that he was the guy he was over this company called WikiLeaks, and he was able to get information from, I guess, the DNC about, internal emails or whatever. And he has faced federal charges for that. He sought asylum. He found it, I guess because he's not a American citizen. He found asylum in an embassy in England from another country. I can't remember which one. I want to say Ecuador, but I'm not sure that's the right one. And then finally, the British authorities also had charges against him. And so somehow, some way, they worked out a deal with that country to physically pull him out of that embassy. And now he's facing charges in the United Kingdom. That's what I kind of know. Talk about, correct me on that, and then talk about why his case is an important case.
Okay, so Julian Assange and what's been happening in Julian Assange's life is important to anybody who is interested in democracy. Julian Assange created WikiLeaks, which was a software application or a platform that would receive information submitted by whistleblowers. So whistleblowers, for your audience that is unaware, mostly whistleblowers that work for the government. If you have a job with the government, you have allegedly whistleblower protection. When you work for the government, they're always telling you if you see something, say something. But they don't actually give you an opportunity to say something without risking losing your job. So Chelsea Manning, who at the time, Chelsea's name is escaping me, but Manning was a government employee, was in the armed services, and witnessed a violation of armed services rules where there were people who were killed intentionally, and there was videotape, people who were killed in Iraq, and Chelsea, using the whistleblower right, the right as a whistleblower, sent that information to WikiLeaks. And Julian Assange, working as a journalist, published that information on WikiLeaks. And as a result of that, WikiLeaks had up until that point existed for maybe 10 years. But when this videotape was disclosed, there was a hunt for Julian Assange. And Julian Assange went into the embassy. He was in England, but he sought protection in an embassy. And you're saying Ecuador, it might be Ecuador, it could be Colombian. It could be the Colombian embassy. I'm looking it up on WikiLeaks, on Wikipedia right now, because I can't remember which embassy it was. Right now he's in Belmarsh prison. I do know that. And my husband and I, along with many, many other people, have been trying to get the story out about WikiLeaks and about Julian Assange, because it's important, and it's especially important for me as the publisher of an independent publication called the LA Progressive. So he is accused of violating the Espionage Act. That has never happened with a journalist. Journalists have the freedom and the right to report the information that they are given. In fact, the information that was given to Julian Assange was also covered in the New York Times. They're not going after the New York Times. They are going after this independent, small person who has no resources and no power and had to hide out in the embassy. The United States, most powerful nation in the world, finally got, I don't want to say Ecuador. I should look this up. It could be Colombia, and I should know it, but got them to get rid of Julian Assange, and they put him out of the embassy. And as soon as they put him out of the embassy, the United States had also made a deal with the UK, and the UK arrested him. The United States also worked with Australia. Now, it's important to note here that Julian Assange is not an American citizen. Julian Assange is a citizen of Australia. He's under no obligation to follow the laws of the United States. He's been to the United States once, and I think, for a very limited time, he may have had a layover. But the fact is, he did not get this information from any unusual way. He got it from a whistleblower, and he published it as any publisher could do or would do. I would do it. And it's really dangerous. They're establishing a dangerous precedent. If he is prosecuted under the Espionage Act, I would be placed in a very vulnerable position, because the precedent will have been established where a journalist has been arrested and charged for just reporting the truth.
Yeah, and so I'm glad that you spelled that out, because a lot of people have heard the name, and like I said, I'm thinking about the DNC stuff, but this was really about the Iraq War situation. And like you, I can't remember what Chelsea Manning's name now is, but I know that now that when you started telling the story, I got it. So I'm glad that you pointed that out. The other person was Marianne Williamson. You're one of the few platforms that really, really talked to her. I tried to get her on before she dropped out this time, but that really have kind of talked to her about what her vision is and why she wanted to run for president this time and 4 years ago. Kind of talk to the listeners about what was, I don't know if appealing to you and your husband as far as to interview her, but what did you get out of your conversations and her campaign?
So what attracted me most to Marianne, I knew Marianne before she ran. I knew Marianne maybe 10 years before she ran. Initially, we met, she was giving a talk, and I was asked to field the audience for questions on her behalf. And we became friends after that initial meeting. And she told me that at the time that our friendship started, that she was really interested in politics. She was concerned about the direction that the nation was going. She had a huge following. She, at that time, had several New York Times bestsellers. And she thought that she could possibly take her celebrity, for lack of a better word, and get the group of people that followed her to become more engaged civically, because most of the people that followed Marianne were not civically engaged, and she wanted to change that. And so she started doing these trainings called Sister Giant, which was really focusing on getting women, as most of her followers are women, getting women more engaged, civic engagement, whether it be running for office or yada, yada, yada. A little while after that, maybe a year or so after that, she decided to run for a California congressional seat. And that was when I heard her spell out what her vision was for that congressional district, and it fully aligned with mine. Her position on education, on tuition reimbursement, on healthcare, universal healthcare especially. It's one thing that many politicians have a difficult time taking a stand for universal healthcare, primarily because the funders of their campaigns, the deep-pocketed corporations, it's difficult to talk against big pharma. It's difficult to speak against the insurance industry. And she was willing to do it. And for the most part, her position on the environment, on healthcare, on education, on immigration, she was the first candidate to talk about the need for reparations. I don't know if you remember, when she had an opportunity to be on the debating stage, she brought up reparations, and then the other candidates jumped in, but no one was talking about reparations until Mary Ann introduced the topic and showed that she was brave enough to bring that to the American people.
Well, that's what got my attention when she stood up there and said the R word, right, in politics, and said and talked about reparations and was articulate about it. It wasn't like she was kind of saying, well, we need a study and it's time to explore this, which is most political talk. I mean, she was making an argument that few black elected officials were saying. And so naturally, I said, let me pay attention to her and see how she's going. And, you know, with the dynamics of what was happening, you know, it was a long shot chance, but, you know, I really felt this time around was going to be really a struggle because everybody's just kind of focused in on saving democracy, right? But,
Yeah.
you know, so I didn't think she was going to get any traction this time. But, you know, I think 4 years from now, she might need to look at it again. But, you know, it's like, you know, after a while you get burned out on that. So, but I wanted to touch on it because you actually had interaction with her. And like I said, I would love to have her on the podcast to just have a conversation. All right. So what I was afraid of, time is slipping away from us. But you come from a state where, well, let me ask you this question because I'm not going to get to all these other folks. Although I did want to kind of get your take on LaFonza Butler because she's a fellow Jacksonian. So I wanted to get your take on how she is. But Barbara Lee in a debate recently pulled out a platform that said she wanted a $50 minimum wage. Did you, when you saw that, did you say, woohoo? Or did, you know, what was your reaction when she pulled that out and started talking about that? And how realistic are her chances in this Senate race?
Yeah, so in California, the two top winners in the primary go on to the general election. So the three people, Katie Porter, Adam Schiff, and Barbara Lee, are competing against each other. My hope is that Adam Schiff and Katie Porter are competing for the same audience, and that Barbara Lee is going to pick up the progressives and the people of color, and that'll give her a shot because Adam Schiff has all the money in the world, and Barbara Lee does not. The $50 minimum wage, I have to be very honest with you, I didn't know that she said that, but I'm glad that she did. How realistic is it that that will ever be achievable in this current climate? I don't think it is, but it certainly is something to target. It's something to get people to think, what would the minimum wage be if we had kept pace with cost of living? If you look at where the minimum wage was when the minimum wage was first established, I think, and then you increased it as the cost of living has increased, I think it's quite possible that we would be at $50 an hour now. You know, you mentioned that you were just a kid when Ronald Reagan was in office. Well, I wasn't a kid. And I can remember when my father worked a job as a bus driver and my mother didn't work, and he bought a home and we had two cars and we went on vacations, and you can't do that now. And there's a whole generation, several generations of people who don't realize that that's how it was. That was normal. That wasn't rich. That was just regular normal. And we were black people then and we're black people now. So we could do that then on a bus driver's salary.
Yeah.
So what's her chances? I think her chances are pretty good.
Okay.
To make it to the general election.
So what's your take on LaFonza? How do you feel? She took the job knowing that basically she wasn't going to run for it. She had been a national figure running Emily's List. What is your take on her and how that whole process of her being selected?
I've always had tremendous respect for LaFonza Butler, but I have way more respect for her now than I ever did. And I think that her acceptance of that was strategic. I think that she knew that if she didn't take it, he was going to select someone else, and that someone else may have chosen to run in November. And she knew that she was not going to run in November. So I'm happy that she accepted the offer. I'm glad that she turned down an opportunity to run in November. And I think that she is a brilliant young woman who has a fantastic future ahead of her.
So, Gavin Newsom, is he the real deal? Is he somebody that's legitimate in 2028? Has he been the kind of governor that somebody that is considered progressive would feel comfortable running for that national position?
So, when you say somebody who is progressive, and I definitely am progressive, but I'm also a realist. I think that Gavin Newsom also is talented. He's smart, savvy, tactical, and he does his homework. I have met him face to face, had dinner with him. I've listened to him. I've watched him plan for what's going to happen in the 4 years from now. It looks like that's what he's doing. He's never said that to me, but it looks like that's what he's doing. But I think that we as progressive have to be real. If someone were a pure progressive, they would never make it politically in this current climate where we have how many 70 million, 71 million people that voted for Donald Trump. So that tells you something about the mindset of the average American. I think that it's impossible for us to get exactly what we want as progressives. But if Gavin were to run currently, and notwithstanding, I don't know, maybe there's a Cornel West or somebody else or Marianne Williamson, but I think that Gavin would be a good president.
What about if he's running against Kamala Harris, who also was a statewide elected official in California, has been is currently the vice president, has been considered, I don't know if she's been considered a polarizing figure in a true sense, but she's been out there and she's got national cachet. And like I said, she's also from California. So, and from San Francisco. So how would that match up, you think?
So what Gavin has advantages that Kamala Harris did not have. Gavin walks through this world in a different body. And I believe that Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, has had to make concessions that Gavin Newsom may not have needed to make in order to just keep her job. There are a lot of people that take exception with her being a prosecutor, take exception with some of the decisions she made as a prosecutor in San Francisco. I don't necessarily take exception. I will say that she has never struck me as being a trailblazer. I think that Gavin Newsom might be more willing to take more daring positions, but everything has to be taken into consideration. I mean, when he was in San Francisco as the mayor of San Francisco, and he allowed same-sex couples to get married, that was a brave, daring thing to do, that he just kind of made the decision to go out there and do it. I don't think that a Black woman could have made a decision like that without paying a heavy price. Just a woman, period, not just a Black woman, a woman, period. So he has more freedom than she does, and we as the citizens can benefit from that freedom. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm, again, being a realist. We, the people, that's the part that I really care about. What do we do? How do we, if we wanted Kamala Harris to be president, how are we making that happen in terms of giving her the support that she needs to have her back? Let's say that she really is a progressive in her heart, and she really wants to make some bold moves, but she knows the backlash that she'd get. What would we do?
And that's a good question to pose to people. So I did want to ask you, since you're in LA and Karen Bass is the mayor, if you had to give a report card grade, what would it be, and kind of justify it real quick?
I would say I would give her a B+, and it would be because of how she's addressing the number one problem, I think the number one problem in Los Angeles, which is the huge unhoused population. She's stepped in day one trying to make a dent in the problem, and she is making a dent.
Okay. So one thing you like to do is make book recommendations. So for my audience,
Okay.
what book should they be reading right now?
Okay, so I didn't know you were going to ask me this question, but before I got on this call, I was watching Fani Willis on the stand, and it was just so clear to me that there's such a cultural lack of cultural competency and a breakdown culturally between the people who are questioning her and Fani Willis. And they were asking her about the fact that she has so much cash on hand. And she talked about how her father instructed her from a very young age. She says, when you grow up as a Black woman, you better have money that you keep in your home. First of all, her father was a former Black Panther. Secondly, a lot of people are unfamiliar with the United States history of making Black people run for their lives. We know about Tulsa, Oklahoma. But that happened all over the United States. And a book that they should read is written by a man named Elliot Jaspin. And the name of the book is Buried in the Bitter Waters, The Hidden History of Racial Cleansing in America. So I would say that that's a book they definitely should read. But I can give you a list. Keeanga Yamada Taylor wrote Race for Profit, How Banks and the Real Estate Industry Undermined Black Home Ownership. Kelly Lytle Hernandez, who won the MacArthur Genius Award, wrote City of Inmates, Conquest, Rebellion, and the Rise of Human Caging in Los Angeles. And this book focuses on how the indigenous people, indigenous to Mexico, were treated and caged here in Los Angeles, and in ways that have never really been reported on. So that was my short answer to your question.
That's good. That's good stuff. All right. If people want to get in touch with you and get hooked up with LA Progressive and all that, how can they do that?
Go to laprogressive.com and subscribe. It's free. Or you could donate. That would be nice. But we publish every day. It's a digital publication, and it's all progressive politics 24/7.
Well, Sharon Kyle, I appreciate the time that you did give me. It's pretty obvious we probably could talk a lot longer, but I appreciate you giving me this time and coming on the podcast. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Eric. It's been a pleasure.
All right, guys, and we'll catch y'all on the other side. All right, and we are back. And so now it is time for our final guest. And that guest is none other than Joe Trippi. Joe Trippi is credited for his pioneering work to bring political campaigns into the digital age. As national campaign manager for Howard Dean's presidential campaign, Trippi's vision of using the internet to connect directly with the campaign supporters changed the way all campaigns will be waged going forward. The Atlantic magazine says Trippi's influence on Democratic Party politics has been profound and lasting. Trippi currently serves as a senior strategist for several nonprofit and corporate clients, as well as a senior advisor to the Lincoln Project, where he is helping build a pro-democracy coalition to take on the authoritarian threat to our democracy. Trippi also serves as a senior advisor to Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. Trippi was a senior strategist on Doug Jones's historic victory in Alabama, helping elect the first Democratic U.S. Senator in Alabama in 25 years. Trippi wrote the ads and helped build the campaign strategy, which raised over $22 million online. Trippi began his political career working on Edward M. Kennedy's presidential campaign in 1980. Since then, he has led efforts on a number of presidential, gubernatorial, Senate, and congressional campaigns. Trippi was responsible for groundbreaking media strategies that helped elect Ro Khanna, Mark Takano, Seth Moulton, and Kwaize Mfume, among others. He was also the media consultant and senior strategist behind California Governor Jerry Brown's historic come-from-behind victory in 2010, despite being outspent 4-1. In addition to his political work, Trippi has consulted with a number of leading nonprofits and corporations, including the Humane Society of the United States, the American Cancer Society, Best Friends Animal Society, Monster.com, Toyota, Daimler Chrysler, SES Americom, Corning, LabCorp, IBM, Lionsgate Films, Best Buy, and the Baltimore Orioles. Trippi is the host of the podcast That Trippi Show and the author of The Revolution Will Not Be Televised, Democracy, the Internet, and the Overthrow of Everything. The story of how his revolutionary use of the internet combined with an impassioned, contagious desire to overturn politics, as usual, grew into a national grassroots movement and changed the face of American politics forever. A key figure in several presidential campaigns, Trippi has served as a political commentator and analyst for MSNBC, NBC, CBS, Fox, and CNN. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor and distinct privilege to have as a guest on this podcast, Joe Trippi. All right, the man, the myth, the legend, Joe Trippi. How you doing, sir? You doing good?
Oh yeah, good to be with you, man.
Well, it's good to see you. I wish I had money to have you. I just had Mike Podhoser on, and I was like, man, if I could have had Mike and Joe Trippi on my team in 2008, this would be a whole different conversation, I tell you. But I really am honored to have you come on the show, and especially in this year talking about politics. One of the things...
It's an honor to be with you, man. It really is. So.
Yes, sir. So one of the things I like to do with folks at the beginning of the interview is to throw a quote at them and then kind of get their response. And that quote could be something they said, something was written in a book, or something relating to the topic. So your quote is, "I learned something important about politics Kennedy style. The cause was everything. Win or lose, spend yourself completely. Leave nothing on the table, not even your health. Losing would be painful, but not as painful as knowing there was something else you could have done." What does that quote mean to you?
I not only learned it with Kennedy, but with I ran track in high school and college, and you run through the tape, man. You give it everything. There's nothing left. The cause is everything. I mean, when I said that, I meant a noble cause. I mean, fighting, for people's rights or for people's right to vote and things like that. And, if you look at our democracy right now, fighting with everything you've got to save it, because I think a lot of people are sort of sleepwalking, they kind of aren't engaged. I mean, you got to be engaged and you got to give it everything, or that's how democracy, that's how it dies. So, I don't know. It's always been what motivated me. That is Kennedy style politics. I learned it working for Kennedy, gosh, and when I was 19, 20, 21 years old. But it stuck with me throughout my career. And I just try to pass that on. And so thank you for bringing that quote up.
Yes, sir. All right. We're going to play the time machine for a minute. So it's the mid 1970s. You're a student at San Jose State University. What gave you the spark to get involved in politics then?
Oh, I was an aeronautical engineering major.
Okay.
And about the same time, I started realizing that I don't need to understand lift and drag coefficients, which is things you need to know. If I wanted to fly. Also, I figured out that if I did learn to fly and get into aeronautics, I'd be flying a big bus around in the sky. I wouldn't be really flying. And about the same time, there was a woman by the name of Iola Williams trying to be the first African American to run for city council in the city of San Jose. And the entire punditry was saying she couldn't possibly win because San Jose was only 3% black, and therefore the incumbent she was running against was surely going to defeat her. Something about that just really ticked me off and made me think, well, I'll go walk precincts for her. And I did, and I got other kids on campus to walk precincts for her, and it took a while, but she got on the council. So, that was a big deal, to have that kind of impact, or to see, just simple act of walking precincts, knocking on doors, talking to people could make change. And it wasn't that far after that, long after that, I think maybe 2-3 years later, when the Kennedy organization called me up and said, we want folks like you to come to work for us. And I got in my car and thought I couldn't drive across the country fast enough. And then I never did go back and finish my degree in aeronautical engineering, which is something my father, who's passed away, was not really happy about it at the time.
I understand. Having run 2 U.S. Senate campaigns in the South during the Trump era, what do you see as the major challenges for Democratic candidates in that region of the country?
Well, a lot of the challenges of Democratic candidates is how the Democratic Party itself has not invested in building infrastructure and building a strong party. It's like they abandoned it because we can't win, therefore don't spend any time, money, effort, even recruiting candidates or helping candidates. And so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. When Doug Jones ran in 2017, no Democrat had won in Alabama statewide for Senate in 25 years. We couldn't get anybody in Washington in the party to get behind us because they thought there's no way, it can't be done. We're focused on other places. But after a few weeks, I mean, Doug Jones was an incredible candidate. He attracted, having prosecuted the the Klan members that bombed the 16th Street Baptist Church in Alabama, in Birmingham. He had pursued that case, and it was 20 years before he brought them to justice, but he did. And I think that made it possible for him not just to galvanize the community and Democrats, but there were enough Republicans who respected him that it gave us a shot, at bringing them along. Took us a while to convince the Democratic Party that it was possible, and they finally came on. And we won. But one of the things, the big challenge is the polarization, particularly the racial polarization that Trump creates. It is, he preys on people's fears. He makes them anxious, angry, pits them against each other. And in that polarized environment, the South becomes very, very tough. I mean, so we won in 2017. This is a year after Trump was, he won in 2016. We won a year out because as much as he had polarized things, it wasn't the way it is today, or even 2 years later. So by 2020, I guess it was, the polarization that he had now, 3 years of him banging that divisiveness and really driving people apart, whether it made it impossible for even Doug Jones to bridge the divide that Trump had created. So, but I think that makes it even more incumbent for us all in southern states to work together to build a stronger Democratic Party, and part of that is welcoming some of the Republicans that are leaving that party because of Trump, and make the Democratic Party a big tent where we're civil, and we may not all get our way, but we can work together. We can at least negotiate and compromise with each other, because you can't compromise with the polarized Republican Party. So, but I also think, the part of the problem is money has become everything in politics, and we've got to find ways to invest in building a stronger campaign structure for our candidates in the South, and that means I think trying to get the state and national party to get that, investing locally, building a party again from the ground up, that we all are part of making, is something we need to do.
And I totally agree with that assessment. I made reference to my Senate campaign in '08. Fortunately for me, Howard Dean was the national chairman, and he invested in every state committee, and so there was an infrastructure there for me to run in at the local level, and they were like my staff for because of lack of money, and it's just really, really important. I remember that because Vivian Figures was running in Alabama at the same time, and the Alabama folks had come over to meet with me, and I was like going, but you've got a candidate. And they were like, well, she can't win. I said, well, if she can't win, I can't win. See, we're all in this thing together. And I'll never forget that. We were in Oxford, and then they got back and did what they could for her, So I definitely understand that assessment, and it's just vital for us to compete in every state. But yes, sir.
What part of that? So Dean had the 50-state strategy, which was party that invested all 50 states, and the problem has become, like, if you look at this next presidential election, 2024, it's going to be decided in like 6 states. California, Trump's not going to get the electoral college votes there. Biden will. Alabama, Biden ain't going to get the so no one's going to, the Democratic Party's not going to spend any money in Alabama in 2024. I mean, it just the mindset. No, we got to win Wisconsin, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Georgia, the usual suspects. And of course, the Republican Party will be thinking the same thing. They got to win those places. So both parties will spend a ton of money and invest big time in those states. And the Democrats, we can't keep doing that. I mean, it's whittling down. We have to expand, particularly with the way the demographics in the South are rapidly changing and making it possible over time for those states to be competitive. If we actually invested, helped candidates like you at the time, I mean, a bigger strategy than like, hey, it's a presidential year, so we're going to put a lot of money in 6 places. And it's like now we're even, pulling out of Iowa in terms of, which was a state that was competitive. But if we don't hold caucuses or anything there, then how long will it be till that party? I think that party always benefited from being the first state, because then you had all these Democratic candidates running around building even their volunteers would be left to build work in a governor's race or a House race in Iowa. There's a consequence to saying, no, we're not going to play there this year. And this is the first time that I can remember in my, all the times I've worked in presidential elections where we didn't really do much to build the volunteer base and strengthen the party in Iowa. And that could hurt Biden now in our House candidates, because, we don't have a real activist base that's been energized by, all the campaigns that would have been there this year. So I think that's definitely the case that happened in the South, that we have to rebuild.
You have been an innovator when it comes to using technology in campaigns. The first in-house computer when Bradley in '82 ran for governor of California. First 1-800 number when Jerry Brown ran for president in 1992. And the online technology employed in Howard Dean's 2004 presidential run. The New Republic even said you were the man who reinvented campaigning. Why was the use of technology so important to you as a political strategist?
I had always, again, I was this, like I said earlier, I was an aeronautical engineering major. I actually, had an understanding of technology, and also that San Jose State, Silicon Valley. So it's like, we were, I was immersed in that. And the thing that always drove me crazy about television, which was the big thing, everybody was, big TV commercials. We still spend zillions of dollars on TV commercials, is that it was a one-way thing. In other words, like I had worked for Iola Williams, knocking on doors. I was talking to people. We were having a conversation. I could hear what they were saying to me, what they thought the problem was, and then go back to her or whoever I was working for and say, hey, if people are really upset about this, or they really need help about, and then, the TV doesn't do that. TV is like just, it's just one way, and you're banging people over the head with a hammer, with an electronic hammer, saying, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And so I was always looking for a way to interact. And that's how the 800 number happened. It was the only way I could think of how do I at least get people out there to respond, and we get to at least know who liked what we said. Now we can start calling them back and talking or whatever, right? So that was 92. And by the way, that was the height of technology back then. I mean,
that's right.
There weren't, the internet was just, wasn't happening yet, not enough people on it. But by 2004, I realized that this thing called the internet, wow, now we could build a real connection with our supporters. So we a lot of the stuff that you see out there today, like we built a thing it was called Dean TV. We didn't know it was going to be that somebody would go to a bunch of venture capitalists and fund YouTube, which was kind of what we had built inside the Dean campaign, where hundreds of thousands of people would share videos and we could post shows that Howard Dean spoke in or that I was conducting as campaign manager. The smartphone, the iPhone doesn't come along till 2007. So we didn't have that back with Dean. But you took what the Obama campaign was able to do was take all the toolkit that we had built in the Dean campaign, add in some new stuff, sprinkle in some new stuff that didn't even exist when we were running with Howard Dean. And, without all that, I don't think he defeats Hillary Clinton. The establishment was with Hillary. This was, Howard Dean put big scare into the Democratic establishment. They had their candidate. They knew who they wanted. And we scared the living daylights out of them. We lost, but we scared the daylights out of them. Then, like I said, I think the Obama campaign understood the power of what we had started, also understood the new things, like will.i.am in that video that they made. That couldn't have been done in the Dean campaign. I mean, there'd be just the difference. There's nobody would have shared it on a phone and stuff. So they really upped the game. And then I think it's pretty much all downhill since then, because I think the Democratic Party writ large learned pretty much one thing, and that was, hey, this internet stuff that those guys all started is really cool. You can raise money by sending emails to people. Whereas the Republican Party, who gets all this big billionaire money, realized, hey, that stuff's really cool, and we could actually engage directly with people, which is what I was trying to do. And one day I woke up. So in the Dean campaign, we had the Blog for America. Howard Dean would post something in the morning. 650,000 people would gather on that blog and comment. And I would say, hey, Frank, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. And Howard's may use that in a speech tonight. And then Howard would go do it. And the whole community, all those 650, knew we were listening. This was us and them engaging. They owned part of the campaign. It was in 2016. No one did that. Even Obama's campaign did not do that. They did not do anything like that. Engage, not that way. That's not how they engage. Email. And then in 2016, I wake up one day, and there's this thing called Twitter. And there's this guy named Donald Trump with 17 million people following him. And I realized that was the Dean blog. Twitter had become Donald Trump's personal blog, personal way to engage. And he was doing the same thing. Hey, Frank, and I was like, it astonished me to this day that the only campaign since Dean to actually get, or the only, to actually get the power, and look how powerful it is, because this guy has totally restructured the Republican Party. I mean, taken it over, and why are they afraid of? They're afraid of those people. He has so glued those people with that engagement that all these senators, all these members, they're afraid that he's going to tell them, don't vote for that guy. So they gotta do what he says. And I always thought back then I had a sort of utopian, this is going to really serve democracy. We're going to have a community where we can all engage together. I never saw this side of it coming, a demagogue, a dictator wannabe, who so got that direct ability of the internet to connect with people and used it in the way he did. It's almost, sometimes when they say, the guy who reinvented campaigning, I think, oh, please, God, don't blame me.
I understand. So I think you kind of answered my next question. And how would you grade Biden's use of social media compared to Trump? I guess, what would you suggest to them that they needed to do because when I found out that Donald Trump was on Twitch, right? Because my son is a big gamer, and so it was like, yeah, I saw a Donald Trump ad on Twitch. I was like, what? And so how would you approach them and say, hey guys, look, we need to step up our game against this guy? What would you say?
I'd say that's exactly right. I'd say it's the same thing as abandoning Democratic candidates in the South. It is another thing where they got what was really important, and that's why you have Breitbart and Alex Jones and all these zillions of these different kind of channels that the right wing nuts can all tune into and pick up. It's not just Fox. It's a gigantic network of online news sites and websites and talking heads and everything. And we never built anything like that on our side. I mean, as a party or as a pro-democracy movement, so they've got all these disinfo sites, and there's no and the mainstream media plays the both sides thing. Well, Obama says this or Biden says this, but Trump says that. They don't say who's right. They just say he said this, he said that, but the other side is waking up every day with this entire infrastructure that they built, saying, he's too old. Biden's laptop, whatever. They bang it. What happened with Obama with his birth certificate?
Right.
Trump starts saying, hey, and the online stuff on the right starts saying he wasn't born here. We all roll our eyes. We all roll our eyes and say, hey, oh God, no one's going to believe that. A couple of years of that with no response, and guess what? You got to show them your birth certificate, and even then they say, oh, it's fake, it's a forgery, because they've got that network, they can spread that. We never built it, so it's not Biden's fault. This is what I'm saying. It was I think we all on our side saw the utopia. I mean, how it could really be a great thing, and how it would bring us all together, and never saw the networks that they were building. Even the Breitbart, the ones that you could visibly, see online. There is. Tell me what the pro-democracy Breitbart is on the internet. We don't have one. In other words, so Biden's his team now is getting actually really. Last few months, they've been on it on social media. That's Twitter account or X account, God. Anyway, there is just really, really good. But the amplification of zillions of people, a Breitbart or a Drudge or, all the different that amplify that social media, we never built it. We're just starting now. I mean, in a lot of ways, things like the Lincoln Project, Midas Touch, the Bulwark. I mean, some of them are, and other sites, I'm just rattling off, are kind of like, okay, well, if no one else is going to take this stuff on social media, we'll do it. But the party, the DNC, and building, our own, I don't want to say their stuff these are all propaganda networks that they've built. And that's the other problem, because we won't build a propaganda network. I mean, well, shoot, propaganda? Joe, why do you want to start a propaganda network, right? But we didn't start a truth one either. Something that I'm not talking about. And so I just think it's really interesting how the technology doesn't know the culprit or the hero who's using it. And they're better at the dark side than we are, because we won't use a lot of the dark arts. We're not. We just aren't inclined to stick phony bots on. For them, this is like it's second nature. And they went right to work on how to build it. And I luckily for us, I think we're coming online. I think the Biden campaign's getting better, but man, we got a lot of ground to make up, just like the ground we got to make up in the South. It'll take time, but hopefully we're making enough inroads to win again in 2024. That's what I think will defeat Trump in 2024, but it will be because just enough stuff is happening now that and enough people have tuned in to the stakes that I think the country will preserve democracy and keep trying to become the more perfect union that we still have failed to become.
All right, and I got a couple more questions because I really was fascinated about this particular, finding out this nugget about you. In 2008, you helped the movement for democratic change challenge Mugabe's Zimbabwe African National Union. What takeaways from that election can prove helpful in the upcoming 2024 election?
Oh man, it was totally from the ground up. I mean, we won. Then Mugabe held a press conference and said, "Well, you didn't win by enough. We have to have a runoff," which I always thought was fascinating because there were only two candidates.
Right.
We beat, but you didn't win by enough. We got to do it over. Which actually does have something to do with 2024, because I think we got to beat Trump, by as big a margin as we possibly can. We got to crush. The only way a party or a country like that, the only way you can win, kind of to destroy the dark side, it's not by beating them by, and we've seen this, not by beating them by 14,000 votes in Arizona, or whatever. They always think, well, we got to work harder, and we'll be able to take the country over next time. So it's got to be, we all have to, the pro-democracy side has to be unified. It has to be rise up from the ground, and actually vote. You actually get there. We got to get everybody there. There's hell of a lot more people that are for democracy in this country than are for Trump and ending our democracy. So we just have to make sure that we win by a big enough margin that Trump can't sit there and, like Mugabe did, and say, "Hey, you won." Well, he won't ever say that. He won't ever admit it. But, where it's unquestionable, where it's clear, because that's the only way the Republican Party, I don't even know if it can be saved, but the only way it can change and move away from him is if they get finally that, what, we lost in 2020. We didn't see a red wave in 2022. We just got crushed in 2024. We got to drop this guy and what he's trying to do. So I think the bigger thing is to really double down on our efforts. In Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe only had 13% internet penetration that year. Only 13% of the people had the internet. But we were able to put flyers on a website so that they could people who did have the internet and did have a printer could download them and print them and take them and give them to others in their neighborhood or in their little town or village, and spread the word. That's how we won. There was no TV. The state owned TV. There was no television. He was on TV telling everything. So that's what I'm saying here. I think where we need to have a campaign that does things like that. That gets down to where anybody in any neighborhood in this country can you may not be the guy in your neighborhood who has a computer and a printer, but there is somebody in the and they know that the campaign just put out this thing, and that's what we want you to tell your neighbors this week. And we do that, and I think that's how we rally enough Americans to push Trump out and get the kind of defeat that we win, that we need to kind of put this away. Otherwise, we could be doing this for a decade. I mean, where they're always these people are not going away. I mean, the people he has fomented and created this like just hubris about this is their country, damn it, and we're not going to let you take it. Well, that's going to be there. If he dropped tomorrow, there are going to be plenty of those people out there. 18%. This is a crazy number. 18% of Americans now believe that Taylor Swift is part of a conspiracy with the NFL to reelect Joe Biden. Now, how's that? It is happening on the web. It's happening in these websites in this network. My guess is we'll all laugh and ignore it, like his birth certificate thing. And I guarantee you, in about a month, you and I are going to we'd be talking about now 26% of the American people think that Taylor Swift is part of a psychological operation, secret, handshake thing with the NFL to help Joe Biden get reelected. What I'm saying is that machine isn't going away. We have to develop the muscle memory, the old style printing press, whatever, and use the internet and the tools, and the tops of our campaigns and our party needs to understand that that's where this thing is being fought now. That's why you go, how could the economy be the way it is? And his numbers are so damn bad on the economy. Look at the jobs and everything. It's because every day people are getting hammered with. They're still being told gas prices are $6 a gallon. I mean, like on their sites that they go visit. None of them, not one of them, like Fox yesterday, did not mention at all any of the trial stuff that's going on with Trump. I mean, it's just not happening. They don't know that he's got 91 felony counts against him, because in that world, in their website world all these networks that they've created, no one ever says that to them. They all talk about Biden's old, the Democrats are socialists, and they're going to try. They're going to get rid of the dollar. So you better buy gold. I mean, whatever the conspiracy is to make people be very afraid about the future. World War III is coming, and it's that we are not batting that stuff back, because we're not even in. As I said, we would never start a propaganda network capable of doing that.
So you've basically been a strategist for progressive candidates and causes throughout your career. Why did you decide to get involved with the Lincoln Project?
It really simple. Look, I worked for Jerry Brown. I worked for Doug Jones, obviously. The Kennedy, Mondale, Dean. All through the years. And I realized Democrats don't really understand how to communicate with these people. I mean, with the center right, I'm not talking about the far right, I'm talking about the center right that's struggling every day because they're worried, they can't believe what's happening with the far right, but at the same time, they've been conditioned over the last 10 years, for maybe 3 decades, but I'm talking about the ones that Democrats are the demons, literally injecting poison into the system. And I realized the guys, in 2020, the people who understood the kind of strength you've got to punch back with, there aren't many in the Democratic Party who understand that that's what a lot of the conservatism is about, sort of strong top to bottom. You take your orders from the top. I mean, that's the way the conservative movement thinks. Well, and we're kind of like, hey, I want to hear everybody's voice. Then we're going to decide together how we're going to change something. No, they're used to this is where we're going, and we're going to take the hill. the Lincoln Project guys get that. And that's why I think they're so good at getting in Trump's head, messing with him, and how to move some of these movable Republicans to think about voting for democracy, for Biden, for Democrats, because that's the only way to save democracy right now. And I decided, look, man, I want to join them and see if I can get more progressives, more Democrats to focus on what they're doing and their style, because I think that is how it's not propaganda. I mean, their stuff is straight at them with real facts, sometimes funny, making fun of Trump, but it's for real. There's no like made up stuff, right? Where the other side's doing the same thing, but it's all phony. And so I think more of us need to learn from groups like there's others too, but I'm just saying that's the one I thought that was the most effective in 2020. I think they understand we have this thing called the Bannon line voters. So Steve Bannon back in 2020 said that in their polling they showed that there were 3 to 6% of Republican voters who could defect and vote for Biden. And so internally in the Lincoln Project, we named we called that the Bannon line. We were going to go after the 6 points. We were going to target the Bannon line and move them, and that's what they did in 2020. You can't say, well, that's what made up the 14,000 votes in Arizona or whatever. But I'm saying that was the whole strategy. I think we as Democrats, pro-democracy, forget about parties right now. It's about putting country over party. We can learn a lot from the way they conduct their campaign. We don't have to do it all that way, but I think we can learn a lot from adding in some of those tactics to how you fight back this disinformation and the autocrats that Trump is trying to lead and let them take over the country.
So I think you kind of answered my last question, because you've been involved in politics for nearly 50 years, and most people would be burned out. And I was going to ask you what's motivating you to stay engaged, but just this interview, I think, answered that question. So I want to just thank you for staying engaged, and I thank you for the enthusiasm the fire that you still have to save this democracy. If people want to get involved with stuff that you're doing, how can they get in touch with you and just highlight what you want people to focus on?
Well, you can always follow me on Twitter or X at Joe Trippi, as JoeTrippi. Also, we have there's a thing, resolutesquare.com is a site where you can find a lot of the stuff I wrote or my podcast. And I have a podcast too, That Trippi Show. So if you were interested, found this interesting, you may want to go where you find this podcast, look for That Trippi Show, and you can hear, I do more about, okay, so South Carolina's coming up, as a campaign manager, what do I see? What's the poll telling me? What to ignore in the poll, and what I would do, and sort of, it's actually kind of interesting because so far I've been able to look forward into a state, and I've come pretty close. I did say I thought Nikki Haley would win in New Hampshire, but I said she put a scare in him and she might just win. But, and I gave all my reasons. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, as well as the kinds of things you and I just talked about, people should go to That Trippi Show.
Well, Joe Trippi, it's been an honor to sit down and talk with you, man. Been a fan for a long time, and just to be able to have a venue where we could have a conversation, I'm greatly honored to have you on. So thank you for coming.
Same here. It was an honor to be on.
Yes, sir. All right, guys, and we'll catch y'all on the other side. All right, and we are back. So, in closing, what a tremendous show. I am really honored to have had Miss Christina Carrega, Sharon Kyle, and Joe Trippi come on this show and grace my presence and our presence on this podcast. And I hope that you were not only entertained by some of their stories, but you were enlightened by their interviews. Again, guys, I appreciate y'all. Appreciate your support. Appreciate y'all listening. And until next time.